Hi friends, welcome back. Today, or this week at least, we are going to start looking at some analysis of our data. All of you who already have about 4 weeks of data points, I believe. So that means that you all have a table that is labeled with a title. That's as table 1, most likely if it's your first table for your CRA. And it has your independent variables along one side. So for me, it is the number of values that you're looking at. It has your independent variables along one side. So for me, it's the different names of the farms I'm looking at. And it has your dependent variables, which change by your independent variable. And for me, that's cows, chickens, and goats at the farms that I'm looking at in Indiana. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, you know what, that's some fantastic raw data, but what I really need is a way to make this data make sense. So I'm going to go ahead and calculate my averages, so my mean of this data, and I do that by doing this little formula right here. I take the sum of my data points, C3 to C7, and divide it by the total number of points that I have, 5, or in the sample size. Also, Google is fantastic, and if you just type average and highlight these numbers, it does that for you. Then I take a look at something like my chickens, right? And I calculate the average to be 87. However, half of my numbers are less than 87. 19, 34, 76. That's a little bit less than 87. So I look at it and I maybe take a look at my median. And I say, 76 and 87 aren't that far apart. But 87 is still a lot bigger than 19, for example. So I look at this data and I say, you know what? I have a big number, 212. Maybe that's an outlier. And you are not going to actually be deleting any of your data that you have, but for the sake of just curiosity, I might erase that and see, wow, this value went down a lot after my 212, my potential outlier, was removed. So I'll put that back in there, and then I'll ask myself, you know what? I wonder how much variance there is in my sample. So then what I'll do is I'll calculate my standard deviation, which is a calculation that is based off mean. It's where you essentially find the average and then you break down how far from the average every single one of my data points are. And here it's telling me that it looks like the average, or the variation, the departure from the average, the departure from the mean from my sample size is about 76, as in that's how 76 is the number by which a lot of my data in this sample varies. And again, if I go through and I delete that 212, it's 35. And so that indicates to me that my data might not be super precise when I have this value. And all I want to know that for is so that I can mention that in my CRA when I go about critiquing my data and my analysis. I'm not going to delete anything, I'm not going to change my data, but I will keep that in mind so that I can use that when the time comes to have that conversation. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and make a chart because that is our next step here. I'm going to highlight the information that I need. So I want to compare these two farms and these chickens. I'm going to insert a chart. And since I'm not looking at change over time, it's probably going to give me something like a bar graph. My first thought when I look at this bar graph is, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that it has such a terrible title. So I'm going to change that to cows, chickens, and goats in Indiana farms. And I'm going to change my horizontal axis title, which doesn't exist, to farm number or farm name. And then I'm going to change my vertical axis title to number of animals. Okay, animals is a hard word to spell. Then I'm going to take a look and say, you know what? This makes sense for me. However, some of you guys might be working with something different. And in that case, you might want to choose a different type of chart, right? So for example, if I was looking at something that changes over time, I might go with something that looks like this, right? Something that's more of a scatter plot, which it doesn't look right here because it's not what I need. But if I'm looking at changes over time, a scatter plot might be good. If I am trying to compare percentages, then a pie graph would be good. But for today, we want you guys to focus on correctly creating just bar graphs. We're going to keep it simple with Google Drive and Google Slides or Google Sheets. Alrighty, so that is all I had for you. Let me know if you have any questions, and we're good.